Having a healthy gut is one of the most crucial parts in anyone's health because the imbalance of the system can wreak havoc with our well-being. As of course we all know that the body is interconnected. So to chat to us about the gut-brain connection is Dr. Mark Opperman. Welcome back, Mark. Good to have you with us. Mark, we hear so often about the gut-brain connection, and we talk about sort of feelings of butterflies and things when you're excited. So you can see that there is many different ways that it is connected. But when we're talking about it in terms of this discussion, what are we talking about, that connection?
Michael, I think one of the first things that we need to realize is that when we develop as an embryo, we develop as three tubes. One is the neural tube, which is responsible for the brain and the spine and the peripheral neurons. And then we developed as a cardiac tube, which is responsible for your vascular system and the heart. When we look at the gut tube, it's responsible for the whole digestive system and all the other organs.
Right.
Now, when we look at the nerve endings in the gut, by sheer volume, it's almost equal to that of the brain.
Okay.
And therefore, it's often referred to as the second brain.
Yes.
There's a direct connection between the gut and the brain. What I think very few people understand is that the enteric nervous system, all those nerves in the gut, can function completely independent of the brain. And to give an example, if we become a quadriplegic, okay, where everything is paralyzed, the gut will continue functioning.
Okay.
The muscles in the gut will keep contracting, etc., etc. So your gut will function. You might be incontinent, but the gut function on its own.
Okay.
The connection between the brain and the gut is direct, the vagus nerve. Now that sends messages from a sensory perspective to the brain. So often it's said that my gut tells me that something is wrong. Your gut is telling you something is wrong because it's directly communicating to the brain.
Okay.
When we look at the organisms, we all know about the microbes that live in our gut, and we take probiotics, etc., etc. What we don't know is just how important this microbiome basically is. I'm going to ask you a question. We have 3 trillion human cells. How many microorganisms do you think live in the gut?
Well, certainly millions, but I'm going to guess that you're going to tell me a hell of a lot more than that.
4 trillion.
4 trillion, wow.
So we are more microorganism than we are human.
That's fascinating, sure.
The combined weight of these organisms is almost equal to that of our brain, between 1 and 2 kilograms.
Sure.
The genetic material of all these organisms functions as an organ on itself.
Okay.
An organ without we cannot survive. So it's incredibly important for us to have a diverse ecosystem in the gut. There's a big difference in the differentiation between men and women when it comes to microorganisms that's in the gut. And as we get older, that changes, and certain conditions and medications can change this, like antibiotics.
And I think it just goes to show when you put it into such a clear, cogent argument or discussion, it's amazing how little attention so many of us do pay to the quality of the food that we eat, the work that we do to maintain a healthy gut, and the things that we, like the lifestyle factors, like eliminating stress and focusing on those elements which really disrupt that microbiome when it is such a fundamental, important aspect of our bodies.
Absolutely. You know what? In medicine, we only started looking at the gut in the 1990s, and only now, recently, we are starting to see more research and papers being published on this.
Right.
Prior to 2010, there was very, very, very little information about gut and hormones and health. Now we realize when we look at the microbiome And that's, again, all the organisms, and may include bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, etc., algae that live in the gut. They are responsible for the expression of genes.
Right.
And an unhealthy expression of these genes can lead to things like cancer. They lead to weight gain. They are responsible for changes in mood. We've often talked about permeability of a gut, a leaky gut that leads to fatigue, etc., etc. When we look at the hormones, and I think for most people, when they think of hormones, they think testosterone and estrogen. So let's look at those two. Testosterone, we have discussed previously, and we know that testosterone in the brain elevates dopamine levels. Now, if we look at certain conditions like Parkinson's disease is a disease where there's decrease in activity of these dopamine receptors and of dopamine. And that leads to things like movement problems, a masked face. But those are just the motor symptoms. Some of the biggest symptoms are the effect that Parkinson's has on gut health, the motility of the gut. These people start with gut symptoms way before they start with the shaking, etc., etc. So the organisms that live in the gut, those microorganisms, create an inflammatory reaction or stop an inflammatory reaction, which affects the cells in the brain, dopamine, neurotransmitters. For women, for instance, estrogen, when we hear the word estrogen, we think of a hormone. Estrogen is a combination, it's a group of hormones, three major ones. Estradiol is produced in the ovaries, but it's metabolized in our gut to estrone and estriol. And these are psychoactive hormones. So they play a role in the brain. They affect brain function. Now, I think last or 2 weeks ago, we discussed the effect of estrogen in the brain. And estrogen is related to those parts in the brain that's associated with learning and memory. So an unhealthy gut with an unhealthy metabolism of estrogen or a breakdown of estrogen leads to changes in memory. Now, we've said that Alzheimer's disease has a higher incidence in women than in men, and especially in women with estrogen problems or estrogen deficiency. Our gut is incredibly important in metabolizing and producing thyroid hormones, weight gain, diabetes. We cannot stress the role of the gut enough.
So Mark, if you've got a gut issue, where do you start so that you can do the reparation needed so that your gut is then in a better condition to undertake these processes that are so essential to our body and our brain in a huge way?
Michael, I think that's a very, very difficult question to answer because the majority of us would start taking something like a probiotic. Now, probiotics are good for the gut, but if I take a single strain probiotic, I can lead to an overgrowth of one type.
Right.
What we are looking for in the gut is a diverse ecosystem of different bacteria, viruses, etc., etc. So for me, it would be start eating a healthy diet.
Right.
And that means we eat a variety of foods. Now, on our show, on this show, we have people like Nikki who talk about what we should eat and how we should eat. And they talk about whole foods and micronutrients. So a whole food diet, healthy vegetables, healthy fruit, healthy meat, healthy carbohydrates, that promotes a healthy gut.
Yes.
So that's where I would start.
Okay.
And then you can do eliminating kind of exercises where we look at cutting gluten out of a diet.
Yes, yes.
The biggest culprit in an unhealthy gut is sugar.
Absolutely. Huge one.
So-
We always talk about this.
Get rid of sugar in any form, not artificial sweeteners. They're worse than anything else. Get rid of refined sugar.
Yes.
If you want sugar, get it through your fruits.
Yes, absolutely.
Get it through your vegetables. But stay away from sugar and artificial colorants, etc., etc.
Any of that processed food
Anything
that just
that's
doesn't look
processed,
like it really
stay
is.
away from it. You know what? Get back into our gardens. Plant your own vegetables, whether it's just lettuce or whatever, and try and use that. Drink smoothies in the mornings made from fresh fruit and yogurt, fermented food, sauerkraut, kimchi.
Wonderful stuff, yeah.
You know, anything that's been there. Just be careful because we ferment them often in vinegar.
Ah,
And
okay.
vinegar contains sugar,
Yes, right.
so be careful. Alcohol.
Same thing. Mark, it's fascinating. I think you've opened my eyes. I thought I knew a lot about this stuff, but just the depth of the importance of it, your gut is fantastic. So thank you for sharing some great insights.